hello everyone. My name is Shana, and yeah, so my story began. I was born into domestic abuse, so it was something that was normalized, especially in our culture, which was a South Asian. We come from a South Asian community, born and raised in London, and yeah, domestic abuse was something that we saw as a family. It was completely normalized. We saw it on a day-to-day basis, my father being extremely violent to my mother, and that was the way of life. So nobody ever highlighted to me that it was wrong. I never knew what a healthy relationship looked like. So as a young child growing up in domestic abuse, I thought the way you communicated with the world is if you don't like something, get aggressive, get violent, that's fine, shout, be abusive, that's completely normal. But there was gender inequality there as well. So men can be abusive, but women couldn't. So it was a really difficult upbringing. School, so went through school, was extremely quiet, timid child, went through secondary school. That's when got into gangs, was expelled from school a few times. And that's because, when we talk about trauma that is involved with domestic abuse, there's a hell of a lot of trauma. And the symptoms, anybody who's gone through a difficult time will make up their own. Everybody has coping mechanisms. So my coping mechanism was, lashing out, and it was difficult. Eventually I had a forced marriage at the age of 17, was taken abroad, left there for a year until I agreed to marry this man. It wasn't an arranged marriage, it was a forced marriage in order to come back to this country. And throughout my life, there was a lot of suffering, there was a lot of challenges. However, I never understood that was wrong. That was just normal for me. So eventually came back to this country, and that's when my father tried to take my life because I tried to leave my family home. I tried to leave the marriage. I was only 18 myself. And yeah, my father got very, very violent and tried to take my life. And I remember just running out the house with not even a pair of shoes on. And then, police got involved. I entered the world of the system and lived in a refuge for a little while at the age of 18, 9 years, raising my child. And again, nobody told me. People did use the word domestic abuse, domestic violence at that time, but what is that? Nobody sat down with me and explained to me that domestic abuse is really complex, it's really wide, and what you experienced. A lot of people said it wasn't my fault. Yeah, I understood it wasn't my fault, but when I entered the system fed me a story that I was a victim, that poor victim, poor Shana went through all of this, father tried to murder her, blah blah blah. So in my head, I always thought, okay, I'm a victim here, so what do victims do? That word victim, again, it's not very empowering. So the system, the refugees, the support workers, they helped me, rehomed me. I raised my daughter for 9 years. I didn't enter into a relationship because my focus was to raise my child. Eventually, strangers helped me, kindness of lots of strangers taught me how to drive, passed my driving test. They kicked me into university. I had dyslexia, so I didn't believe that I could have GCSEs. Didn't think I could have an education. Eventually, underwent a business management honors program, a degree, and then became president of a university. So everything I learned from my business management book knowledge, I applied it to real life. Let me tell you something, managing organizations, whatever you learn on a textbook isn't necessarily what happens in real life. So that was a challenging experience, but it was a good one. So being a high profile person at a university, but then I walked into an abusive relationship all on my own, because throughout my life, nobody told me what a healthy relationship looked like. you know. And then especially when you're in a high profile position, you know, how do you come out and tell somebody, well, actually, I'm experiencing domestic abuse, if A, you don't even know what that looks like, because you've normalized it, and B, the shame and stigma around domestic abuse. So again, tolerated the abuse for 5 years. Two more children came from that abusive relationship, and then I fled again because it was life and death. You know, a lot of people who experience domestic abuse, we downplay the abuse, we normalize it, we deny it, we think we can control it. Let me tell you, and there's so much fear involved, because that's all, you know, that's your home you're going to leave, that's your job you're going to leave. There's so many things that, you know, are fearful around fleeing domestic abuse. And a lot of people say, well, why didn't she just leave? It's not that easy. So I fled when the perpetrator cut my CCTV and my phone line. He was abusive all throughout, but that was when the penny finally dropped, that actually I can't control this anymore. I thought I was managing the situation. You know, you don't get the perpetrator angry, he's not going to behave badly. So for 5 years, you know, I changed. My daughter, obviously my daughter came from my first marriage. Again, from a bubbly human being, she turned out to be, she had her own problems as well, you know, witnessing domestic abuse and the effects on the child as well. So I had two more younger boys who couldn't speak, because obviously it's really difficult, adverse childhood experiences that they've went through. And again, I couldn't do anything. I entered the system again in 2018, and again the refugees remained the same. So in 16 years, businesses change, people change, technology changes, but the refugees remain the same. And I thought, hang on a minute, you guys fed this story to me when I was 18. Now you're feeding me this story again, that I'm the poor little victim. And I thought, hang on a minute, something's not right. I refuse to accept this story. There's more to this than, you know, that meets the eye. And I thought, something's just not right. I'm not going to be the victim anymore. So then I did my research around domestic abuse, and I thought, oh my God, what I tolerated for that long wasn't right, you know. And then I thought, instead of being the victim, I'm going to label myself as a survivor. So I did all my research on domestic abuse. Throughout my year, we're roughly 3 months in the refuge, I was then rehomed in a different area of Merseyside, and it was a predominantly white area. So I received so many community support. And then I underwent a program in life coaching. So it's neuro-linguistic programming, and I became a practitioner for NLP. And I thought, all this time, I thought I was a victim. Well, actually, I'm the boss of my life. I'm the driver of my bus. And I basically transformed my life within a short period of time. And whether you know, bad things are going to happen to everybody. Bad things happen to everybody, but you've got a choice. You know, you can, you know, throw yourself a pity party and cry about it, or you could say to yourself, hang on a minute, this ain't right. Something's not right. And instead of giving, like I gave everybody my power, I thought, I'm going to take that power back. You know, I'm going to take that power back, and I'm going to focus on transforming myself. So I transformed myself. My kids followed. My kids can speak now, they can talk, they're thriving. And my daughter, everybody's thriving. New start, fresh start. Let me tell you, it wasn't easy. It was a horrific process, and it requires a hell of a lot of effort. But once you have little goals, little baby goals, and you have a vision, you know where you want to be, that's the start. So whether it's domestic abuse, mental health, or anything else, I feel as though, oh my God, it's all the same stuff. And what I did, I mean, I could be diagnosed with cancer today, and 6 months left to live, but I still have a choice. There is a choice. And throughout my life, I never thought I had a choice. Everything was done for me, everything was forced upon me. So I never realized I had a choice until an NLP practitioner came into my life. And then I became an NLP practitioner. I thought, oh my God, you have a choice. Everyone has a choice, but some people don't know that they have a choice. So once I exercised my choice to change, to make things better, things have. And the point I'm trying to make is, domestic abuse is everywhere, and it's not a private matter, it's everybody's business because society created it. Originally I thought it was a South Asian community issue. It's probably an Asian thing, domestic abuse, but it's not, because this area I'm living in now in St. Helens is predominantly white. And again, domestic abuse is thriving in culture, and especially now COVID-19, there's going to isolation. A lot of people are going to be forced to live in live with each other, even if you live with your abuser, if anything. And how do you cope with that? What do you do? And again, so this is so important to get that message out there for people who are experiencing domestic abuse. But the thing about me now, I'm an NLP practitioner. I can't go and say abusers are bad people, because let me tell you, I've worked with so many perpetrators of domestic abuse, and in their eyes, they're the victim. In their eyes, he deserved it or she deserved it, you know. And attacking people isn't the right way. I know, Lymm, you know, you guys talk a lot about kindness, and it's all about kindness. Every aspect of my life, every challenge of my life, I suffered, and through that suffering, when strangers came to me with kindness, that's when transformation happened. So, and this is one of my principles for that I live by: kindness and compassion. I'm sorry, my baby's here. What's up? Do you want to say hi to everyone? Hi.
Hello.
So, mommy's having a meeting. Go, go, go. You can have it. He wanted some chocolate. So obviously school's off, kids are around. So again, these are, people think the rules of life, you know, economies have changed, cultures have changed, society has changed, and we live in a capitalist society where it's all about more, 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 me. I think that's the problem. I mean, if we think about less about me and more about we, I think we can achieve a hell of a lot. And simple foundations, you know, principles to live by. I mean, my principles are, it's tattooed on my hand, if anything, you know, kindness, compassion, courage, and consideration. I truly believe in those principles, and that's the only way. I mean, it's not a competition, and it's all about, I strongly believe it's all about kindness and compassion, seeing it from the other person's point of view. So I now deliver programs in the community, free programs called the Best Me program. It's all about transforming your pain into power. So it doesn't matter what your pain is, bring it. Because I really believe through adversity, something's not right. Something isn't right in that adversity, and that there's an opportunity there to change and transform. And once you can program your mind into looking for opportunities, I swear to God, you're so powerful. So that's, sorry, everybody's now saying hi to me. So there's my, you can eat those chocolates. Yes, you can. So anyway, so that's what I do in the community now. And since, you know, running a grassroots program in the community, remember, I came with nothing. I came to this new area with nothing, just a pram. But I work for the local authority now. And even though I didn't have money at that time, what I did have was my time. So I gave my time to the people. And that was my contribution, because sometimes we could sit there thinking, how can I do anything with my life? I don't have this, I don't have that. You do have something powerful, and it's already within you, and that's your supercomputer that you carry around, which is your brain. And once you know how to use your brain, you're the most powerful human being on the planet. And that's what I intend to do on a daily basis. You know, I go out there and I share my story, and that helps a lot of people. And that gives me a buzz. That's my purpose, you know, and that's why I do what I do, from a grassroots level and now from a council position. Now I'm the first domestic abuse prevention officer for St. Helens. And apart from this COVID-19 hiccup, which is stopping me from doing things, but it's exciting, you know, because there's so many other ways of communicating with people, for instance, through Zoom. So here we are. So that's me. That's my history. I hope, Ian, you're not bored, because you've already heard this once. But yeah, that's me basically. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Shana. That's well, inspirational. As it's great to see the energy that's coming out of you know, your whole attitude and the way that you live your life. I can relate to that because I'm probably in a similar position with the struggles that I've had, and never say that suffered anymore or I am suffering. I've got a lot of health conditions that I need to sort of get beyond most days, well, every day, and I don't look at them as issues anymore. Really, they're just part of me. So it's interesting to.
One moment, I didn't get that. Could
On something.
The screen has frozen. Mummy's in Nashville. Go.
Stuff. I've had struggles and they've overcome them, and yet, you know, it's so nice when you hear that people have come out the other side. And so, if I could just ask you a couple of questions, because
Yep.
I know that I look at these now. So, how do you feel about forgiveness? You know, the thing, because I put a lot of energy into being angry because of my health and different things, and you learn, you sort of fall out with people, and then you can bear grudges. But I don't have any sort of animosity towards anything or anything that happened in my past now. So how do you feel about that? You know, the forgiveness side of things.
I think forgiveness is so important, because you don't forgive because you're letting the other person off with their behavior. You forgive for yourself, because through forgiveness comes healing. I have no anger towards any of the people who have done bad to me, because I know anger is poison. Because when I got angry, that spoiled my entire day. Even if that person is like 100 miles away, that person, I'm still giving permission for that person to spoil my day, because I'm thinking about it and I'm getting angry about it. And anger only does you harm. You know, it doesn't do them harm. They're probably loving the fact that you're getting angry over what they've done to you. So I thought, no way. You know, life is short. You know, nobody's time. You don't know how long you're on this planet for. 5 minutes, a year, 2 years, 10 years. So make the most of it. Every day's a gift, and that's how I see life. And sometimes, yeah, I'm not always bubbly and happy. I do have my dips, but it's being aware that, hang on a minute, Shana, you're having a dip now, and making sure your environment is positive. So for instance, when I'm having a bad day and I'm moody, Shana, you know, my kids constantly are pointing at my principles in my hand saying, Mom, kindness, compassion. So what I've created, or what I do tell people in my classes, is create a circle of accountability, people that mean a hell of a lot to you, and they're watching you because they know your goals. So see life as though you are being video 24/7, because there's some things that you do on your own that you wouldn't do in public. Does that make sense? So there's the private you, there's the family you, and there's the public you. So whichever is the best version of you, try and make sure your environment is like that. So you're always checking yourself. You know, there's a saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So I try my best. I mean, this morning I wasn't feeling great. I went for a run and I meditated for a while, and then boom, back to me. You know, back to Shana Begum. So everybody will have a dip, and don't punish yourself. Don't be mean to yourself. I mean, you be kind to your best friend, but it's funny how when you've done something wrong, you punish yourself. No, you need to practice self-kindness first. You know, be kind to yourself first. And once you can, once you're, you know what they say, once your cup is full, then let the rest overflow. Then you can be good to other people. So if you want to be the best version of yourself, you need to invest in yourself. And that's what I say. And sometimes, you know, people in Syria living in war-torn countries, I mean, we've got COVID-19 here. It's a global issue, you know, and people in other countries. So we are still in a great place. The fact that we do have an NHS, and it's all about gratitude, thinking about what you do have and being grateful for those parts of your body that does work. And it's all about gratitude. You know, once my NLP practitioner once told me, Shana, even though I'm going through a hard time at that time, what have you got to be grateful for? And I thought, I've just left my house. My life is a mess. What the hell are you talking about gratitude? You know, I was really angry, But now, a year down, I understand exactly why the key fundamental, most successful, happy people say, be grateful, have gratitude in your attitude, because that reprograms your mind, and it's so important to understand, the secrets behind being grateful, because it is a secret. A lot of people don't know that simple things about being grateful for your life. So yeah, so that would be something that I tell all your viewers. 5 things in your hand, think about 5 things. It could be simple things like, oh, the sun's shining today, I'm grateful for that. My health, I'm grateful for that. The fact that I can walk and talk, I'm grateful for that. My kids are really naughty and they're splashing water everywhere, but I'm grateful for that. So just be grateful for what you do have. And yeah, and once you program your mind to constantly see the good things in your life, that's when you can see opportunities. Because even in the sign of adversity, I mean, when I blog, I talk about COVID-19, and people, there's so much horror and hate out there. I mean, think about all the good things that you do have. What are the good things that you can see? There's a hell of a lot of cleaning that I need to get on with. That's optimistic. So think about what you can do with the time that you do have in the house in isolation. And once you program your mind to constantly see opportunities, you'll get by this much better than worrying about the uncertainties. I mean, COVID-19 is outside of your circle of control. So that's another thing I teach on my classes, circle of influence, circle of concern. It's a Dr. Stephen Covey's model. And again, COVID-19 is all the way out there. You have no control over that. So focus on things that are within your circle of control. So again, that's another thing. I know you asked me one question and I went off on a tangent. I do that a lot. So I'm sorry. Over to you.
No, that's fine, because obviously I teach mindfulness now, but I've lived a mindful lifestyle for the last 10 years. And so I'm constantly trying to tap into present moment awareness, because there's no, the past is the past, the future,
Absolutely.
you can't control it. And it's easier said than done. I have
Yeah,
to admit that.
absolutely.
I don't do a great deal of sitting down, meditating, but you don't have to do. I think the idea of mindfulness is just when you do get to sort of grips with a mindful mindset, it is literally a sixth sense. Everything
Absolutely.
opens, your ears open, your eyes open, all your 5 senses that you've got just become attuned to present day awareness. And that, some people think that, oh well, I've tried it, I can't do it. But as you said, it's your subconscious mind. Your brain is a powerful thing, and by tapping into these moments, we can learn to calm ourselves down. We can take ourselves out of that fight or flight, which has become a default mode for many people, and back into that other state.
And that's dangerous. That's a dangerous mode. That's a dangerous mode, the flight or fight, reptilian brain. So yeah, again, we talk about the 3 functional parts of the brain. Again, you've hit it on the head. Yeah. I think we've paused. Things have paused on my end.
I'm still here.
Okay. Hi, Ian.
Shana,
how are you?
Shana, I'm very well, thank you. And thank you so much for that. I could hear that story a million times and smile that you've taken the actions that you've taken to create the life you're creating. I hope you noticed Tony's body language change, because so many of the things about taking opportunities and making opportunities happen, they so buy into Tony's ethics. When you stuck your hand up to say there are 5 things to be grateful for every day, Tony was almost touching your nose to nose on the screen, because there are a lot of things we're blessed with. I think
absolutely
from many angles, and I could talk about it all day, but from a time to change angle, we're always talking about how do we bust stigma. And I guess when we come to domestic violence, domestic abuse, when we come to honour-based violence, there's still a lot of stigma busting that needs to happen to create that safety for people to leave dangerous situations. And I only think of an example. Tragically, we had the death of Shaflir Ahmed, a murder of Shaflir Ahmed a few years ago, which is literally a family home's 500 metres from where I'm sitting. The response from the community initially, which is predominantly white middle class, the response initially was it could never have happened. They're a fine, upstanding community. Violence couldn't have happened in their house. Obviously, after the eventual court case, and in hindsight, there were a lot of telltale signs where Shaflia was probably reaching out for help from her school and from other people, but we didn't hear the signs, we didn't see the signs. And you talk about the community you're working in at the moment. There's probably another community where we need to continue to break stigma, where there's a stereotypical image of a guy wearing a white wife beater vest, holding a can of Stella in his hand with a Rottweiler in his lawn. It's 10 o'clock in the morning and there's a Union Jack flying in his garden. So it's another community, and we have different prejudices that exist about those communities. How do we continue to, and probably the same as the Irish traveller community, where women are subject to massive amounts of abuse and violence. How do we, or are we successfully breaking stigma that people can reach out and we can also reach in? Because it's a bit of both. And are we doing it well enough?
Yeah, I think domestic abuse, especially with a new arm to it, which is coercive control. I mean, we need to educate the community. What I do is it's heavy based on education. For instance, my story, I didn't know it was domestic abuse. A hell of a lot of people don't know it's domestic abuse. Domestic abuse isn't just a punch in the face. You know, it's not just emotional. It's not just psychological. There is coercive control. It's not just sexual abuse. There's so many, facets to domestic abuse. And I think education in schools from a young age is essential. It's essential. Children need to know what a healthy relationship looks like. Domestic abuse, I mean, I know a CEO who is very well spoken, who is actually a man who's experiencing domestic abuse. I mean, you wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't expect a professional on that level, such a powerful man, to experience domestic abuse. And one thing that the whole of society needs to know is we all have to play our part. Society created domestic abuse. The fact that we think, oh, that's a private matter, it's a private matter, I don't want to get involved. We know we all have a power call, sixth sense. You got your gut instinct. So absolutely, you've got this superpower, your brain within you. So when something doesn't feel right. So it's empowering the community to, as bystanders of domestic abuse, to know how to act, to have that confidence to act. If it's a simple 101 phone call, report it. You have a duty, because today it might not be your problem, but tomorrow it might be, because you might see yourself in an abusive relationship. So my campaigning strategy would be personal responsibility, community personal responsibility. Everybody do your bit, and it's not just the man. That man you've just described, that isn't domestic abuse, because domestic abuse, it sees no color, it sees no gender, it sees no, it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anybody. And even the most influential people in society, they could be a coercive controlling person. Does that make sense? You don't know what's happening in somebody's intimate partner abuse, they call it intimate terrorism. That's what they call it. And they say the statistic 1 in 4 people that experience domestic abuse. I don't believe that. I think it's higher than that. I think half the population don't even know it's domestic abuse. And for me, it would be starting in schools, in every area of society, and education campaigns, and not attacking the perpetrator. Because as soon as I've met so many perpetrators, as soon as you call them, you're a bad person, you're this, you're that, the shield comes up. And once the barrier comes up, they are not going to listen to you, because they think they're in the right. Does that make sense? So my tactics in the community, I wouldn't even call it tactics, it's just what I do when I do meet a perpetrator of domestic abuse is, in their head, they're probably the victim. Does that make sense? So it's about educating without being abusive. Again, that kindness element that Tony talked about, it's just educating people there's a better way. You don't have to be abusive, you know, and teaching them different to run on a different program. If anything, it's understanding your subconscious mind, it's understanding NLP, if anything, neuro linguistic programming, and everybody runs on a certain program depending on your life experiences and your environment. And that can change. Because when I was in a bad environment, when I was in the refuge with all the drug addicts and people who were drinking alcohol, guess what? Hang around with 9 addicts, you'll be number 10. And that is exactly what I was. You see, my environment was bad, and that's why I was bad. But now I'm in a positive environment. I mean, look at me today. You know, I've transformed my life, and that's because the people around me are amazing people. They're good people. So this is what we need to do. We need to lift each other up instead of attacking people. You know, when I see homeless people in the street, it hurts me. I mean, when you hear their stories, some could be through bereavement. I mean, some are educated people who are on the streets. Some have experienced domestic abuse as a young child, or sexual, you know, child sexual exploitation, and as a result, that's why they are the way they are. So we should be a community that, you know, leads with kindness and compassion instead of judgment and hatred, or they deserve that, they're doing it to themselves. That's the wrong attitude to have. So with, in respect to domestic abuse, your original question, I would get survivors to start talking about it, because I talk about it now, and if anybody wants to judge me, I'm like, that's you, that's not me, that's not a reflection of me. If you want to hate me, continue, or if you want to judge me, that's a reflection of you, not a reflection of me. So I'm not going to spoil my day. I mean, I'm a governor of 2 schools and they know my story. I mean, I don't feel a less of a human being because I had domestic abuse 25 years of my life. I just feel as though, well, actually I have a better understanding and more compassion and empathy. So I use it as my superpower now, thinking, boom, you know, my lived experience, I use that as a positive thing. And Tony, you wouldn't be here today organizing these Zoom conferences and meetings if it wasn't for your experience. Does that make sense? And you are touching so many people's lives, and you wouldn't have done that if you didn't have that experience. Same with you, Ian. I've heard your story, and again, you're doing what you're doing today because of your life experiences, of your hardship, and look at the transformation you're making, to the impact you're making on the community. So I honestly believe, you know, what's that saying? There was a saying that I forgot, but when it comes to my mind, I'll tell you again. You know, we think we've got control, but sometimes I feel as though things are happening in our life that we haven't got a clue about. And sometimes your future, your path can be more greater and better than you could even ever envisage. You probably think, well, in 5 years time I want this, 10 years time I want that. There could be a bigger plan for you, you know. And even through your adversity, if you can just transform that pain into power, you will be such a powerful person, honestly, and in a positive way, not power hungry or anything, you know. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
I hope that explains, you know, answers your question as well.
No, absolutely. Just two practical questions, Shana.
Yeah.
I'm in a person is in a domestically abusive, domestically violent relationship. What's the first way they can reach out? I'm scared, I don't want to leave my house. How do I reach out in the first instance? And then the second question is, I'm a friend, an outsider, an extended family member. How do I reach in for someone if I think they're suffering?
Okay. If you're the person experiencing domestic abuse, I promise you, you're living in the UK. There's so much help out there. I never knew there was help out there, but there is help. There is specialists, independent domestic abuse advisors in the community. There's so much help out there that, you know, it's mind-blowing. Please take the first step. No one can force you. You need to take that first step. and there will be people who will meet you on the way. You know, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to be the fight of your life. But absolutely, on the other end, I mean, look at me now. I mean, if you met me in 2018, I'm not the same person. I was totally a different person, and you can transform your life. So yeah. So yeah, so that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, if you know somebody who's experiencing domestic abuse, they're going through such a hard time anyway. Don't isolate them. Don't judge them, because it's so easy to say, well, ring that number or ring that number. You know, there is help out there. Just go do it. The fact that they've confided in you, or the fact that you know that something's not right, it's all about that kindness element. Just telling them, you know, help them to prepare, you know, have a safety plan in place, because when it comes to domestic abuse cases, 1 minute you could be fine, the next minute you're not, you know, and time is very unpredictable what can happen. I mean, with me, it was an overnight thing, you know, CCTV was cut on one day, the next day we're out. Does that make sense? There was no planning, there was no preparation. So it's really, really important that if you know that somebody's going through domestic, have that conversation. Same with just shut that door, princess. So it's the same as preparing. Have a safety plan in place, and if you know, like I said, if you know somebody's experienced domestic abuse, have that conversation. You know, don't feel embarrassed, or don't feel as though it's not my place to say. It is. You might be the only person who asks them that question, are you experiencing domestic abuse, is something wrong? And they might not even know it's domestic abuse. Just, you know, gently tell them what a healthy relationship looks like. There's so many advice and websites out there, and websites sometimes are not the best way of communicating with somebody who's going through domestic abuse. Just that one-to-one conversation, that you care about them and you're worried about them, could be fine. But start making those steps. It's all about empowering that person to make that step, that first step. I hope that answers your question, Ian.
Absolutely. My very, very last question then, Shana, just because you touched on technology, and
Yeah.
you may or may not know the answer. Is there some type of web-based browser that doesn't keep people's history for domestic abuse that's being advertised at the moment? So it's like a quick close browser. Are you familiar with it?
You know, I know the browser. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that, but I know when it comes to text messages and stuff, there is a thing called Snapchat, which deletes everything. But as for a browser-wise, I haven't got a clue. No, not the best.
Just something roaming around in my head that I think exists, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
No worries.
Domestic abuse, no. I mean, like I said, my domestic abuse, both of my stories were tolerating, and when it came to a life or death situation, boom, where there was no thinking involved, because your worst enemy, you could be your worst enemy. And at both times I was my worst enemy, because I thought I could handle this situation, I can control this situation, but I couldn't. Does that make sense? So my one was fight or flight. You know, you had to go, and there was no thinking process, because as soon as you start thinking and you put doubt in your mind, that's it, it's game over. You're back to square one. You're back to the abusive relationship. So I was fortunate, if anything. I know some people think, how could you say it's fortunate when you nearly died twice? But for me, that was the only way. That was the only way that penny actually dropped, because people around me knew that there's something wrong. At school, first time when I fled domestic abuse, safeguarding isn't like it was. I mean, back in the day, safeguarding was non-existent, but nowadays safeguarding is great in school. But again, if teachers, definitely my teachers knew something wasn't right at home. But again, you know, how do you start that conversation to a young pupil, that are you experiencing domestic abuse, or is something happening at home? So we all need to look out for one another. Even as professionals, what I've noticed about professionals is there's a lot of signposting. I'll pass it on to A, B, C, and then that's it. No, we all need to follow through, especially if we know somebody's experiencing domestic abuse. Everybody needs to, if you're a professional, you know, own it. Go and follow through. Don't just signpost and chase up Has something happened? Has this person received the correct help? And chase it up, because nowadays we do have a lot of professional organizations that will signpost, to other organizations, but then it gets too messy. Then you get 20, 30 organizations dealing with one domestic abuse case. And the same time, as a person who's experienced domestic abuse, the amount of time I had to repeat my story to different organizations, it was exhausting, because every single time I explained my story, important information was lost. Now I know important information was lost, but at that time, as somebody who's just fled domestic abuse, you're just answering questions. You don't even know what the hell's going on. Does that make sense? So, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but when it comes to professionals need to be more, educated around domestic abuse. What does it look like? And really care, go the extra mile, chase it up, instead of saying, okay, I've done my bit, that's my job finished. Over to you, Ian.
Shana, all of it makes perfect sense. I could listen to you all day, and I think this is something, I'm assuming we'll go offline in a minute, but I would think this is something we really look at doing again. There's a lot of people could benefit from your wisdom and your experience. So I thank you greatly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ian. Thank you, Shana. I really, really appreciate it. Just by having this Zoom meeting and, just us getting together is going to raise people's awareness about the subject. We can put it out there. We can help people. People will be able to relate to your story in some way, shape or form, and that's what usually happens when people tell their stories. Very often people sit there and they think that they're alone with the troubles and the struggles, and then when they hear other people, oh wow, I'm not on my own. Maybe I could discuss this with other people, and that's really all about what we're trying to do with mental health, with domestic abuse, with some of the other things that I get into, and it's just raising awareness, ending the stigma, ending the discrimination, get people talking. It's so powerful, and with the technology these days, thankfully we can still do this. Not that long ago, people wouldn't have been able to communicate like this. So making the most of what we have.
Absolutely.
As you said, taking the positives out of things. It's not always easy. People can't often see that way of thinking, but maybe by just us helping to put the word out there that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
I struggled for many years with chronic pain issues, and that really affected me, but it doesn't anymore. And as you say, we all have a past, but we can get beyond it in some way, shape or form.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And it's really important, Tony, to let people know that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be the fight of your life, but it will be worth it. What have you done in your life that was easy but then worthwhile? Not a lot of things. The stuff that you put effort in, the stuff that is the fight of your life, at the end, that is the thing that's going to be fruitful at the end. Nothing in life is easy, so don't fear hard work, don't fear hardship, don't fear adversity. Just get excited, because nowadays when I'm going through a hard time, I'm thinking, boom, what's the next door that's going to open? Because once I get through this, something else better is coming my way. And now that I've got this attitude, life is such a breeze, and you will have your down days. Absolutely. Everybody has their down days, but it's recognizing that this is a down day and having the ability to lift yourself back up. So that's really important to all your viewers and all your members to realize that there's nothing wrong with you just because you're having a down day, but get excited. Absolutely, get excited. That's so important.
Yeah, no, they are. They're just moments, aren't they? The moments that don't have to consume you. It is challenging, but us three are sat here today.
Dream team.
We've got smiles on our faces. So I thank you very, very much.
You're very
Thank
welcome,
you,
Tony.
Ian. So that's around about 15 minutes we're coming up to. I apologise again. I had no control over the internet connection. Otherwise, it would have been perfect throughout. But
It's okay.